Well, ladies and gentlemen, we move on now to a Morocco-focused performance and pipeline update to tell us about how OCC and ADR are looking in the southern Mediterranean region and broader Africa, as well as the key cities that are performing well. Please give a very warm welcome to Philip Wooler, the Director for the Middle East and Africa at STR.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So what I am going to do is give you a quick rundown of how we are looking globally, how we are looking in Africa, and how we're looking in Morocco. I do think it's important to sort of flash back to 2020. I know a lot of the people in the room will want to forget 2020, but I think we need to bring some sort of context to where we are in 2021. I'm not sure how that is. Just have to bear with me a little bit. I know, but there are a lot of familiar faces in here. But for those that haven't seen 2020, it's a good context for 2021. For those that do not know who STR is, I'll just give you a little bit of a brief. We operate in 180 countries and we collect data, we collect information. 68,000 hotels report into us at the moment. I'm telling you this because when we look at the data, it's very solid data. So that's who we are. That represents about 9.1 million rooms. And hopefully we can quickly move on. Thank you. So that's who we are. I've just passed through that very, very quickly because we do work with a lot of government, ministries of tourism, a lot of government agencies. So I just wanted to mention that. Obviously all the hotel groups, the big hotel groups, the advisors, the investors, the banks. So giving you some sort of understanding of who we work with. In terms of hotel performance, I did mention we have to just flash back a little bit to 2020, and it was a very, very difficult year. We've got the occupancy chart here, and we operate in two different areas. We look at total room inventory and standard. Now, standard is what the open hotels are operating at. The total room inventory is if all hotels were open, what would the occupancy be? And it is obviously very, very tough. Normally, when you look across this chart for any normal year, you would see occupancies ranging from 65 to 73. So that gives you some understanding of how difficult 2020 was. Stronger performers, quite ironically, mainland China finishing the year at 49%. Very, very tough in Africa, Northern Africa, 26% occupancy based on full inventory. Quick look at RevPAR before we move on, and that was clearly a very, very catastrophic year across all the markets worldwide. Generally, this is really driven by occupancy. There was some average room rate drops, but generally speaking, it was occupancy and some pretty strong, horrific numbers there. Europe and, in fact, Northern Africa were the two hardest hit at 63% down. But anyway, we move on, and I think it's important to move on. Are we through the recovery? Well, we're moving through into recovery. It's better, and that's the most important thing. So occupancies are beginning to lift. And this is year to date, August. If we looked at the last 2 months and 3 months, occupancies would be driving a lot higher than these occupancies. So things are improving quite a bit. In Northern Africa, in fact, Morocco is one of the main drivers of occupancy increases, particularly over the last 2 or 3 months. So some strong data coming out of Morocco. Just moving through, I know there's a lot of lines, but I think it's important. We can see the considerable drops in January and February of the pandemic. And then we're moving through in terms of occupancy. We had that second wave around about sort of March, April this year, and then things are beginning to improve. The black line is the 2019 level. So the most important takeaway is the whole world, from a hospitality point of view, is heading in the right direction. We're not quite at 2019 levels, but in certain areas, we certainly are getting a lot stronger. An average room rate, I briefly mentioned that. I think the hoteliers very, very quickly realized that dropping rates was never going to really drive demand in. There were certain pockets where rates were dropped for more domestic business to try and generate more business from the domestic market. But generally speaking, the average room rate, if we go all the way to the end, and I think, again, very, very important to note that most of the regions are above 2019 levels, or very, very close. So room rate is beginning to improve quite dramatically. Looking at some of the Mediterranean countries, we have occupancy and we have the average room rate, which is blue. And some of these key countries, in fact, all of the countries with the exception of Egypt, are actually above 2019 levels from an average room rate point of view. So quite considerable progress. There is obviously some issues with occupancy, but it is still very, very important to see that things are improving quite dramatically. Moving on to Africa. And what we are looking at here, year-to-date occupancies, August 2021. And if we look around Africa, we can see we have some way to go. Pre-pandemic occupancies, generally in Northern Africa, were around about 63%. In Southern Africa, about 60%. So we have some way to go. So on a year-to-date basis, we are struggling, but it's also important to look at that last 8 weeks, which we'll have a closer look at in the next few minutes. For example, Casablanca, occupancies have climbed in the last few weeks and are now tipping the 40% mark. Now, I know that doesn't sound terribly high, but they were operating at levels of 18%. The most important thing is it's certainly trending in the right direction. In Marrakesh as well, occupancy is approaching just over the 40% mark. Elsewhere in Africa, Egypt returning to an improved performance, and then over in West Africa with Dakar with over 50% of the rooms occupied each day, and Accra also doing some fairly good occupancies. The thick yellow line is Morocco. And again, I think the most important takeaway is we can see the very difficult times of March 2020, April 2020, and then there is a steady progress all the way through to September 21. We're still a little bit below 2019, but it is certainly heading in the right direction. The trend is upwards, and we should push through the 2019 levels fairly shortly. Average room rate indexed again to 2019. That is the real sort of benchmark. The cities on the left-hand side of the chart have tipped through the 2019 barrier. If you see Seychelles, Marrakesh is one of them. So the average room rate in Marrakesh is higher than it was pre-pandemic. We go a little bit further down the chart, we have Casablanca a little bit below, and then we can compare all these cities in Africa. So progress is being made, certainly in Morocco, but generally progress is being made all across the continent. So if we turn to Morocco in a little more detail, we can see that the more recent period, and I think again this is the most important thing, we can look at year-to-date numbers, but the most important number really is the last 2 or 3 months. And we see that there are significant progress in the last 2 or 3 months. I think I'm right in saying that Morocco resumed international travel on the 15th of June, along with the resumption of the reintroduction of Operation Mahaba. I think that's right. I probably got that terribly wrong. Which I think we all know subsidizes flights for Moroccans back to Morocco over the summer period. to spend time with their family, and clearly that has helped the occupancies, international travel and returning Moroccans. So up until that point, 19% up until June, from there 44%. And I think the most important thing is also the average room rate. Now it is in dollars, just to make it easier for some, but that I think is what 1,200 Moroccan dirhams. So quite a big increase in the average room rate from the beginning of the year to the last 3 months. Which is there. And I think this is an interesting slide. The grey area at the back is the demand or rooms occupied in 2019. And then the blue is where we are this year. So there's obviously some considerable difference, but again, I think the point I've been trying to make is that the more recent performance of the Moroccan market is considerably better than it has been since the beginning of the pandemic. The grey shaded area, the average, I think, within the country is round about 1 million rooms occupied per month. We can see on the far side we're up to about 800,000, although August is one of the peak months in Morocco. But certainly, very, very encouraging news is heading in the right direction. If we look at some of the other cities, we've gone from the early part of the year all the way through. We've got the Agadir, Casablanca, Marrakesh, Tangier, and again we see a very, very similar trend where we're heading in the right direction. In terms of the occupancy now for Tangier, 70% occupancy currently, very, very strong. A little bit lower in Agadir and Casablanca, but certainly things are heading in the right direction, although there is a little bit of a blip in Casablanca. And the average room rate, this is really indexed again to 2019. That always is the benchmark, the most important point. On the far right-hand side, we have pushed through 2019. Average room rates are stronger in Morocco now than they were in 2019. So certainly some positive news coming out of Morocco. Over in Casablanca, again, looking at the year-to-date numbers for June 2021, a 24% occupancy, pretty obviously a big struggle there, but more recent, in the last 2 or 3 months, occupancy has moved up to 38%, with an average room rate which is also pushed up. So things are certainly getting a little bit stronger in Casablanca. Over in Marrakesh, it's a similar story. Marrakesh is a bigger hotel market. I think we have around about 22,000 rooms in our supply database. We heard about domestic tourism, 35% domestic tourism. So currently, occupancy has pushed up in the last few months from 18% area to 35%. Average room rate has dropped a little bit. That might be more competitive pricing to try and drive business in and try and build occupancy, but still, again, heading in the right direction. And the real successful or the highest performer in Morocco is Tangier. Obviously a strategic gateway between Africa and Europe. Tangier is now outperforming 2019 by some margin, which is at the bottom, 57%, so a strong occupancy of 62%, and an average room rate of $116, so which is over 1,000 Moroccan dirhams. So some quite considerable progress in Tangier. Little bit of news, first one that will encourage more room nights and more tourism into Morocco. Radisson Hotel Group, you will know about this, 1,600 rooms, so a lot of progress there. And speaking of the pipeline, and looking across, we've got, in Morocco, we've got just over 6,000 rooms in the pipeline. The biggest market for new hotels is Egypt, followed by Nigeria and Ethiopia, but there's certainly a lot of attention being paid to Africa. In total, 75,000 rooms under contract. And who are the main companies? Accor tops our list of top parent companies with pipeline, with over 15,000 rooms, followed by Marriott, followed by Hilton. And then the Radisson Hotel Group, I'm not sure if that's been updated, but a lot of the big brands, the big operators certainly pushing through into Africa. And in terms of actual brands, well, Hilton is number one with 5,313, and followed by Movenpick, Novotel, and Fairmont. I think Radisson Hotel will start to push up on this fairly shortly. So a lot of activity with all the big operators, with all the big brands. If we come through to Morocco, we can see there that many of the gateway cities are now seeing a lot of new pipeline coming through. We have 44 hotels and 6,500 rooms coming into Morocco. So, and in cities that were mentioned earlier on, Agadir, Casablanca, Fez, Rabat, Tangier, so we'll all have a number of brand new top quality properties in Morocco. And just to confirm some of those brands here, Radisson should also be on there. So a great selection of Hilton, Fairmont, St. Regis, Park Hyatt, so from luxury all the way through, a fine selection of hotels. And that concludes my presentation.